Hey everyone, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the NAR lawsuit settlement and how it affects property managers. Gotta listen. Welcome everybody to another edition of the Property Management Mastermind podcast. I am your host, Brad Larson. In today's episode titled The NAR Lawsuit and Property Management, we're going to dive into this information that I just talked about. And I'm, again, your host, the Property Management Mastermind Facebook group founder with over 12,000 handpicked members, contributing more posts and responses than any other organized property management focused group. I'm also the founder and owner of RentWerx Property Management, managing over 1,000 plus single family homes in the San Antonio and Austin area. Faithful podcast host contributing to the industry with over 7 years of podcasting. So, wanted to also give you a word on the new format. As I mentioned in previous episodes, we're taking some of the best quotes and topics out of the Property Management Mastermind Facebook group and going in long form here on a podcast. So this one is near and dear to my heart because I've been sitting on this information for a little while. The NAR lawsuit. This is a big deal. And this is a podcast you're going to get more information from than pretty much any other source, because I've watched lots of podcasts on YouTube. I've listened to a bunch, and they're just kind of missing the mark for what property managers need to hear, because they're either people that are ill-informed or they're angling at it such to where they're telling you the information from a broker's perspective where the sky is not falling, or they're telling you from a perspective of not having any real knowledge inside the industry. So having said that, I need to elaborate on my background in the real estate industry. I started as a licensed real estate agent in 2003, became a broker in 2005. So I've been practicing real estate sales, for 23 years. Not all of them have been active. Once I got into property management, I quit selling. But for a dozen plus more of those years, I actively sold properties for a living full time, even getting as good as being named getting awarded here a San Antonio Best of Practices type award. My best year as a sole real estate agent, I sold 50 properties. So, it got to be a pretty big in the endeavor of that. Side note story, you're going to love this. Got into real estate in 2003, just out of the Army. Came here to San Antonio, didn't know anybody, anything. Got my real estate license in a month. Just busted it out. Did not make a single commission for 6 months. My first finally commission after 6 months was a deal that fell apart. The earnest money was at play, $500 of earnest money. And the buyer signed off the earnest money to me, the buyer's agent. That was my first commission in 2003. So having said all that, I've got a good understanding of the working knowledge of real estate. I purchased 2 exit realty franchises in 2004 and 2005. So I've been a franchise brokerage owner, full-time real estate sales since 2003, roughly to about 2015-ish. And we still operate a brokerage inside of RentWerx called SaleWerx. We have full-time agents, and we're highly in tune with what's going on in the real estate market. So also, I'm not a sales guru on YouTube. And that was one of the things I did some research on this podcast in also reading the NAR lawsuit settlement several times and watching numerous podcasts and videos. Is a lot of them are coming at it at an angle of, I'm here to coach you, hire me. Okay. The sky is not falling. Don't worry about the lawsuit. You just got to work harder and try your best. Okay, well, it's not going to be that easy, and we're going to go through some of this. So background, I quoted this and put this on the management Facebook group, the Property Management Mastermind. I said, recording a podcast next week titled The NAR Lawsuit and Property Management. What are your biggest concerns or comments regarding the state of the real estate industry with the pending changes and how those affect the property management industry? Post them here for discussion on the podcast. In just a couple of days, we had 50 plus comments, and it reached 365 posts reach. So pretty decent, lots of good contributors. Keith Wood was a big one in there. Now, Keith came at it as a local board president, and I really do appreciate his comments. And I also take that with a grain of salt, because some of the things he might have said in there are from the meetings internal to that particular board of realtors, and we're not quoting the direct interpretation of the rules and the lawsuit pending with NAR that's actually been approved. So I'm going to go in the background of the DOJ, NAR lawsuit, and all the stuff in there, and try to explain some of it and some of the highlights that led to their decisions that are going to highly impact the property management industry as a side effect to the real estate industry, because we are tied in hand in hand. So a brief history. In 2019, after a lawsuit filed by a group of Missouri homebuyers, the NAR was found guilty to the damages of $1.78 billion from a homebuyer group in Missouri. Again, this is something interesting stuff that I wanted to highlight from several articles I've read. A prominent agent warned the NAR in 2012 the way agents representing sellers set and disclose compensation for the homebuyer's agent through the MLS was an antitrust violation. This was admitted in court and represents price fixing in a free market. Other evidence introduced provided scripts and pre-filled in forms from these big real estate companies. So you're at a listing presentation and you have a listing pre-filled out from one of the losing real estate entities, Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway, whomever you want to name inside of there. They're coming with scripts and listings that says 6% or nothing. And they're all pre-filled in commissions. Well, you can say that's not price fixing, but it kind of is. And the jury, in 3 hours of deliberation, recorded that record judgment and included a bunch of those big real estate companies that we probably have all heard of. Here's a quote: engaged in an unlawful conspiracy that, along with brokerages, has artificially propped up real estate commissions and cost home sellers billions of dollars. So there were numerous copycat lawsuits filed immediately after that. This is partly why the NAR agreed to make a settlement for $418 million being paid out over 4 years. One of the terms in that settlement is that all those antitrust lawsuits go away. So they really didn't have a choice to settle because they either had to do that to get out of all those copycat lawsuits, or they were going to be sued into oblivion. However, inside of that settlement, lots of changes have been put out. And this is where it really gets interesting. And I wanted to give you the background of my history as a broker and also what happened in the DOJ and NAR lawsuits. And I got to say that there's a couple big things. The DOJ is still after the NAR. Department of Justice is not quitting yet. They did a lawsuit in 2005. NAR made it go away in 20 up to 2015. However, the DOJ is going back on that and they're taking the gloves off again. So they're going to be pursuing the NAR for who knows what at all costs. I mean, really, there's no quitting. And given the current administration, they're still going to pursue it. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future with that. The NAR spends up to $100 million a year in lobbying. It's documented that it's 60 plus million a year in Democratic, Republican donations. And then there's all kinds of backdoor donations that they're doing. They're giving to home veteran groups, and then the home veteran groups are fighting certain legislation. So between that and local school boards, I mean, they're giving money all over the place. And it ends up being that NAR is more or less a lobbying association, the second biggest in the country. So that's what they do. That's what we are forced to pay into. The associations, their biggest asset is their data. They're controlling all of the MLS data because years past, it used to be a book. If there was a new listing, it would go into a book. The book was going to be at the real estate company's location in their office. This is, again, pre-internet. And that data was going to be invaluable to a home buyer. And it justified what these buyers agents were getting in commissions to a certain extent. And of course, the home prices were much less. So you get that effect of data and also the home buyer prices. And it made a lot of sense. And it went on for like decades like that. Now, with the invention of the internet, all of that information is now at your fingertips on your home screen. You can find information about what's sold. You can find information about what's on the market. Then it's now becoming a fight over the data. Who's controlling it? Who has a monopoly on those home listings? Who has the monopoly on that information about what homes have sold for in the past in that neighborhood, not only for realtors, but for appraisers? So another fun tidbit in some of the articles I've read, even Redfin, one of the biggest players, Redfin and Zillow, they quit the NAR. So the NAR disgusted them in so many different ways. They're like, heck with it. We don't need it. And there's been a bunch of interesting things. So Rob Hahn has been a good contributor to a lot of the information I'm gathering. He's got a very cool newsletter, Rob Hahn. And In the interesting article that he talked about in this NAR settlement, he's basically saying that the NAR is pushing all of the compliance down to the local MLS, local board of realtors responsibility. So how do you like those apples, right? The NAR loses a lawsuit. They control the local MLSs, but they're pushing all responsibility of enforcement down to the local MLS. Wow, that's pretty ballsy, if I would say, to the least. If you start reading into some of the NAR complaints of sexual harassment, monopoly on the data, I mean, it really does not look good in their favor. I'm not a fan of them at all. So you need to understand also that there is obligatory joining of NAR. So to be into the MLS, multiple listing service here in most markets, especially in the San Antonio, Austin region, you have to join the local board of realtors, have to get the MLS. So that's kind of like antitrust in a sense. It's, I don't know what the correct term a lawyer is going to use and DOJ is going to use, but essentially it's cutting out the free market. And I don't like that, nor do anybody else, because we're forced to pay annual dues to the local MLS, which goes up to the National Association of Realtors. And then they throw these elaborate parties and they spend all this money on lobbying, and they have all these dirty executives that do all kinds of sexual harassment stuff. And it's just a dirty, filthy organization, in my opinion. And we don't need it, because we're looking for somebody that can replace what the MLS is doing. And once the MLS is replaced, why do we need the board of realtors? Why do we need the NAR? Okay, that's kind of getting ahead of myself, but to make a point. So the responsibility, I'm going to quote the website off of the National Association of Realtors in their frequently asked questions. Who will be responsible for enforcing the written agreements and ensuring all parties follow this new practice change? Quote, NAR, off their website, the MLS will be responsible for enforcing the rule regarding written agreements like the MLS enforces other existing rules. So again, wow, you lose the lawsuit and you make the MLS enforce the changes. So what the suit was about. Now I credit Scott Brady for putting this really cool presentation together. You know, he's got this high-speed PowerPoint lawsuit going on, and it did kind of help me put my thoughts together, because once you start reading all these articles and watching all these podcasts and YouTube stuff, you're like, okay, where do I begin? So Scott breaks it down as what the suit is all about. First is steering, and we're going to talk a lot about that. Lack of transparency. For many years, buyer's agents told their clients they worked for free. And we know that to not be the case, because you're basically wrapping in your commission into the loan and you're overpaying the listing agent. Agents are paid the same, which is infuriating. There is no free market, because you could have a 1-year transaction, 2-transaction rookie getting paid 3%, because that's basically what we were offered. In the background of that, we'll talk through some of these commissions and kind of how that worked. Agents are paid the same and buyers are not able to negotiate. All right, I got to tell a quick story on that, the not able to negotiate junk, which infuriated me as an agent. This is 15 years ago. I'm a buyer's agent. I'm writing an offer for my buyer who signed a buyer's representation agreement for 3%. The offer being advertised for a property outside of the city limits is kind of like out in BFE with some acreage. And the offer for commission listed in the MLS was 2%. I make the offer for 3%. I even bump up the asking price and tell them that we're offering a little bit higher to compensate myself. Buyer was cool with it. He knew exactly what was going on. Full disclosure, all signed in advance. Offer submitted. The selling agent comes back to me, goes to her team leader boss at this Keller Williams brokerage. They write back to me that I'm attempting to interfere in their contract between the listing agent and the seller. Tortious interference, I was told, and it's a violation of code of ethics. So basically, in terms, they told me to pound sand, that they were not going to pay me, instead of 2.5%, they were not going to pay me 3%. So cool. The buyer said, fine. You know, I'm like, no big deal. I'm not going to get in the way of this transaction because of a 0.5%. You know, you can square me away later or whatever. We'll just call it even, you know, get me a referral. We'll call it good. I'm not going to be in violation of my code of ethics and stand in the way of you getting this home, because in the end of the day, the buyers, all they want is the dang home. They don't care about the buyer's agent's commission. But I always remember that response from Keller Williams, hiding behind the code of ethics and giving me some bullcrap of tortious interference over that particular buyer's agent commission. And you know what? It's all come crashing down, and we're going to see big changes. And this is part of it. This has been happening for years and years. So this has all been compulsory membership, as I talked about earlier. To get the title of a realtor, you have to join the NAR. Otherwise, you're just a real estate agent. So I know it's semantics. I could care less about titles. I'm a realtor because I belong to NAR. Nobody cares, right? The buyers just want to buy the home. The sellers just want to sell their home. All these fake titles, all these designations only serve a purpose for education. I don't know if it really impresses anybody. So giving you some history of the commissions, as some of you may know or may not know, the selling agents typically have been charging 5 to 7%. 6% has been shoved down the industry's throat for a long, long time. The buyer's agents are typically getting half of that, anywhere from 2.5% to 3%. And you get a lot of buyer's agents that will fluff their feathers off these forums and say, I don't work for anything less than 3%. Okay, well, good luck with that. Things are going to change. The big reason for this change is data and the pace of the work that's involved. Let's look at this 40 years ago. To get somebody to buy a home, you had to meet them at the office. You had to drive them around, open the doors, show them the property, write an offer in person, submit the offer in person and or via fax. Everything had to be in blue ink. Then if there were any counter signatures, you had to go to the buyer directly, find them in person, get a counter signature, submit that back to the selling agent. Selling agent had to take that all to the title company. Title company had to do all the work. You had to attend all the inspections. You had to attend all the any sort of amendments. You had to attend closing. You had to make sure they moved in properly. There was a lot of work involved in buyer's agency. Since the advent of the internet, buyers are now telling their agents, I want to see 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want to see these 4 homes tomorrow between 10 and 4. And the buyer's agents are like, cool, I'll set it up. And they go and open the home. The buyers already know everything they need to know about the home because of the interweb. Everything's already been put out there. All the disclosures been put out there, all the pictures, all the comments. They already know exactly what they're walking into. And then the buyer's agent just has to submit an offer electronically. Cool, you want to make an offer? I'll write it up. I'll send it to you for a DocuSign. DocuSign comes back to me via email. I'll send it via email over to the listing agent. Listing agent goes back and forth with me. We'll negotiate via text and phone. Okay, boom, we have a signed agreement. I'm going to send it to the buyer. Buyer signs off on it on DocuSign electronically. We submit it to the title company. Earnest money's paid electronically. Buyers go to the darn inspection by themselves with an inspector. Any amendments are submitted electronically. Then they go to the title company and they sign, which is done also electronically from a distance a lot of times. All these things are done streamlined via the internet with electronic signature processes. So what is the value of that 3% really entail? Okay, let me put it another way. If you want to understand this a bit more, if you're going to go buy a home in the new process, you have to agree to pay the buyer's agent outside of closing. Sometimes no matter what. I'm going to show you 10 homes. It's $500 a home. Okay, you can do it that way, flat fee. If you closed on a successful transaction, I get 3%. So that $500,000 home you want to purchase, and I'm rounding up for easy math, 3% is $15,000. $15,000. Okay. You're going to have to write that to a buyer's agent outside of closing or at closing on top of your down payment. That's real money. Now, even if lenders decide to allow you to finance that, I want you to do some math on what you feel a $15,000 price hike amortized over 30 years at 6% commission looks like in the total payoff. It turns that $15,000 commission to what? $50, $80, $150,000? It's ridiculous. And people need to understand that unless changes are made as far as what lenders will allow, that's not allowed right now. So how is that going to work? This is how buyer's agency is going to be affected. Now, some settlement guidelines to be implemented. This is where the rubber meets the road. We went back and forth. For a long time, dual agency was a thing. You had 2 agents, 1 transaction. It worked pretty well. But the builder commissions have always been a unique phenomena as well. Builder commissions and builders working directly with a home builder for buyer's agents, that's even more maddening because buyers agents do literally nothing. And if you are not going to admit that, you're lying to yourself. You take a buyer to a new home builder. The new home builder has a salesperson that does 99% of that work. All you did was bring the buyer. They put you down on a contract and are paying you 3, 4, 5, 6%. Where do you think that's coming from? It's just being tacked on to the top of the home, right? I've seen D.R. Horton. They've had 19% margins to work with. So if you walk in as a buyer's agent and say, yeah, you know, that 3%, can you guys pay me a bonus? Sure. Just, make sure the buyer buys this home. And they knock some off the top. Those prices were getting overinflated because of commissions, because of builders, because of appraisers, because of the data in the MLS. All of these reasons, these commissions were getting overinflated, and NAR and the agents underneath were living fat. We were paying the highest commissions in the modern westernized world by far. I mean, I've seen data and stats on that. The average commission per transaction was pushing 5%. I mean, that's like double what's going on in Europe. It's crazy stuff. Okay, so we're going to get into more of the big fallout from here. Settlement guidelines to be implemented. Buyer agreement must be signed prior to showing the property. The buyer-tenant agreement reads buyer-tenant. Okay, this is where we may see some differentiating points in understanding, because there were some rumors that property management was going to be excluded. I don't believe it will be. I believe that any commission source is any commission source. It's kind of like you coming home late at night at 10 p.m. and your mom is furious at the front door, and it's 10 p.m. You walk in the door and, oh, Mom, what do you mean I was supposed to be home at 10? You said 10. I figured it was 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. No, that's not going to work. And this is how it's going to work with the Department of Justice. This is how it's going to work eventually in real life, is property management is going to get lumped in to all of these changes inside of the real estate brokerages. So don't think for a minute that property management will be excluded. So we'll talk through this, okay, as we get going and really get through some of these guidelines. The agent is to be capped. They cannot earn more than what is in the buyer representation agreement. No more buyer commissions are going to be advertised on the MLS. And we no longer have to be a realtor to sell real estate. And the MLS will also, in the near future, get deregulated. The Department of Justice is looking at the MLS as super anti-competitive. And they're going to eventually push to deregulate that data inside of the MLS. And again, back to that other point, the realtor point, you no longer have to be NAR to call yourself, in that. That's a confusing point, but nobody really cares about that. The big one is the showing the property with a buyer's agency agreement prior. Okay. Also, agent being capped. Buyer's agency, what does this all mean? Okay. Before I get into that, what does it all mean? I got to read some good stuff here. So we just got a confirmation from our local board of realtor that 17 August 2024, these details will go into effect for the MLS. We must eliminate and prohibit any requirement of offers of compensation in the MLS between listing brokers or sellers to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives. Buyer representatives, which is also a tenant buyer. The TAR form is a buyer-tenant representation agreement. So again, do not think for a minute, because they left off the word tenant, that property management is excluded. It will not be, in my opinion. Use your own judgment in that. If you can argue with me, great, go ahead. Practice that as you will. Also, another good point inside that, require the MLS to eliminate all broker compensation fields and compensation information in the MLS, which means the required field of having to put a percentage or a dollar figure in the MLS will go away. Underneath the surface, what's that going to cause? Agency is going to have a real hard time going forward. These things are going to cause us some issues. Require the MLS participants working with a buyer to enter into a written agreement with the buyer prior to touring a property. That's kind of the nail in the coffin. So what does it mean for property managers? This is going to be a big thing. Commissions have to be approved at time of offer from a tenant realtor. So that's a big one. And that combines all the three stuff. So to break this down, one, a tenant realtor has to have a tenant realtor buyer representation agreement. Two, a tenant realtor has to provide you written proof of that tenant representation agreement prior to you allowing showing. And three, you have to disclose the commissions to the seller / owner prior to paying the tenant realtor. So I pose this as a scenario to you. All right, you get 1 and 2 accomplished, which is going to be a nightmare of manpower. You have to determine, 1, if that tenant realtor commission is valid, and 2, you have to see it in writing prior to you allowing an in-person showing of any home you represent according to the NAR rules. Okay, that's first. Second, this is according to one of the biggest, I got this information from Scott Brady again, one of the biggest MLS Association attorneys indicated that the compensation offer has to be inside of the original application / offer to the owner / client of a property management company. So what does that mean in English? You put together an offer for a $2,000 a month home. Here comes an applicant. The applicant has a tenant realtor. The tenant realtor wants a $500 commission. You put that in front of the owner client. Hey, Mr. Owner, we have an application for $2,000 to rent per month. It comes with a tenant realtor commission of $500. Do you want to accept that offer? I'll accept the offer of that applicant, but I'm not paying the tenant realtor commission. Okay, where does that put the tenant realtor? Are they going to take that home away from the applicant after they just paid an application fee and they've been approved? Or are they going to try and get that money from the tenant, the actual applicant / soon-to-be tenant? Where are they going to get that commission? And this is where the rubber meets the road because, yeah, a lot of tenants might pay that, but they're not getting it from the brokerage. And then how do they pay that? Do they pay that to the brokerage, or are they cutting a personal check directly to the tenant's realtor? Right? This is getting real sticky now. This is getting real sticky. And this is kind of what we may make the decision here come soon that we might have cut all of that out. So I'll go through this. So the commissions will have zero, if any, incentive with this heading, no matter what. You can actually, make it simplified by just saying no to paying a tenant realtor commissions. This is where steering is going to be a big issue. And I want to make this point and then kind of give you some advice and kind of give you some where we are. But I do want to interject one thing. And at RentWerx, we've been working with Property Meld since they first came out, and we have had tremendous success in the organization and execution of the most challenging part of property management, maintenance, working with Property Meld. And I say that because unlike accounting, which is the same process every month dealing with numbers, maintenance with Property Meld has been so much more improved because it has many variables between the owner, tenant, vendor, and the property management company that have to be combined to complete even the simplest of repairs. If you're not using Property Meld at this point, I would recommend you check them out to improve your maintenance operation and bring your business into the next century. I really do believe in Property Meld. We use them at RentWerx, and I highly recommend them. Go check them out. It does improve your maintenance. So where this is going in the tenant realtor commission side is it ties into the steering effect that I feel like I'm the only one talking about. I cannot tell you enough how much steering is going to happen when the MLS is no longer able to post commissions either in for sale or for rent, because these commissions are going to be hidden. They're going to be on your personal company website. They're going to be inside your personal company website's comments. They're going to try to bury them in the incentives column to where we offer we'll buy down your rate, or we'll offer you a $500 concession at closing. There's types of all these different things where slicky boy agents are going to try to hide their incentives to bring the buyers, to bring the buyer agents. And there's a bunch to this because, we look at it from two different perspectives here. We have RentWerx and we have SaleWerx. Well, RentWerx, inside of that steering, we're very concerned that steering is going to lead to fair housing, and fair housing is going to lead to HUD digging deep into us as a property management company with fair housing complaints or things along those lines. So follow me here. Now, same scenario, tenant realtor submits an offer, an application to rent a home for $2,000 a month. The owner turns down the $500 commission. The tenant realtor goes to the tenant and says, pay up. The tenant says, I don't have that kind of money. What are you going to do? Are you going to stop the tenant from moving in because of a commission? No, the shady agent's going to file a lawsuit. Then that lawsuit's going to turn into a fair housing complaint, because now they're just going to run to the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and say, they discriminated against me. I didn't understand this agreement. Whatever information I can make up to get you to file a case, I'm going to do. Now they're going to look into a fair housing complaint from the tenant realtor and, unfortunately, the property management company, RentWerx. So yeah, that's a slippery slope. Yeah, I'm reaching, as far as straws, but do you want to put your company in that position to where you are now the epicenter of a fair housing complaint over a commission? I mean, we're talking a couple $100, right? RentWerx offers a $300 commission. Some markets don't offer a tenant realtor commission. I talked to Mark Cunningham. He's like, they don't do this in Denver. We never have done this in Denver. We haven't done it in 50 years, so we don't see the big deal. Other agents in different markets, like in Houston, talked to Pete Newbig, they're still offering a month's rent for a tenant realtor commission. Do you think steering is going to happen a little bit there when this starts to become a game and they know XYZ company offers 1 month's rent? I haven't even touched on multifamily, because that gets even stickier, right? Multifamily is worse than single family homes. They offer all kinds of crazy incentives to these apartment locators. And all these apartment locators do is send people over to the apartment, drop my name on your registration card, and they bill them for a month's rent, a month and a half worth of rent, a bonus, this, that, and the other. I mean, that's going to turn into some fair housing stuff as well, if it hasn't already. But back to single family, because this is what we focus on. This is what most of the listeners worry about is, these single family homes or small multifamily homes. They're worried about this because, to kind of give you the bottom line, I think buyer's agency is going to die a slow death. And it could be an 80-20. Okay. 20% of consumers out there will want to work with a buyer's agent. They'd be willing to pay a buyer's agent a flat fee, 5 or 10 grand. Forget about the days of 15, 20, 30 grand as price creep gets up. Imagine if you're doing $1 million listing, $1 million buyer, and you say you're going to pay me 3%, which is $30,000. They're going to say, pound sand. Prior to this, you as a buyer's agent would just say, no, it's free for you. The seller's paying for it. It's a fixed price. It's a fixed commission. That was warned upon decades ago as being antitrust, against the free market principles. And lo and behold, a jury said the same thing in 3 hours. So this is not just me saying this. This is buyer's agent logic. So we feel that buyer's agency is going to die a slow death, if not a quick death. It could be over really fast. But what does this mean for the property management industry when buyer's agency dies? That means we're going to see a flood of has-been real estate agents getting into property management. This also causes another problem because not enough states have enough regulation for property management. The gate to get into the game is really low. Like the state of Idaho, for example, doesn't even require them to have a license. What kind of joke is that? Come on, Idaho, get your stuff together. The state of Texas is much better. All you need is a real estate license and a broker to sponsor you. We've been saying for years that I think the state of Texas needs more requirements to do property management. And it's so easy if they would just listen to this idea. There's 2 designations out there, the TRLS and TRPM. Those designations, to get them, are basically a week-long class on each. So that's, let's call it 8 calendar days in a classroom learning about property management from a verified property management professional teaching property management. And once they pass that course, they get a designation. Designation 1, designation 2. Make that a requirement to do property management. Make your broker take those classes to do property management. Leasing only should be absolutely abolished. That's another thing that's going to be a side effect of this. All these broke buyer's agents are going to get into leasing only. They're going to take these homes that are for rent. I'll lease your home out for you for $500, for $1,000, for 1 month's rent, whatever the cost is. They're going to half-ass screen. They have no idea what they're doing. They're writing a lease agreement that in perpetuity can last forever. I mean, it literally can last for 100 years, 1,000 years, because it just auto renews every month. They have no idea what they're writing. They have no idea what they're putting in the document. They have no idea about security deposits. and they're hosing the owner consumer, but are also kind of doing wrong for the tenant. If Texas Real Estate Commission were really truly a consumer facing entity, they would look at that and say, that's wrong, because we're doing the consumer wrong, having them go to just a minimally experienced realtor and having them write a promulgated lease agreement that they have no idea how to even digest and explain. So buyer's agency dying is going to lead that many more agents to, one, get into the business of property management, or to leave. Another side effect, what happens when buyer's agency declines by 80%, and now your membership into the MLS, the local board of realtors, declines by 50 or 60%. And then the membership of the NAR declines by 50% or 60%. On top of them being deregulated, with the MLS no longer being a requirement to list properties, to get it out to the broad market on the interweb. In my prediction, the board of realtors, the MLSs, and the NAR are eventually going to have real problems keeping their doors open. I don't want to say they're going to collapse, but maybe they're going to shrink to something to the effect of what NARPM is, a very small organization covering a fraction of property managers. NARPM only covers maybe 5% or less of property management companies out there in the US. There are allegedly 220,000 property management companies. NARPM has a legitimate membership of 5,000. So is this what NAR and the local board of realtors is destined to become? Are they going to become so meaningless because the anti-competitive restraints are being lifted? The MLS is no longer going to be the only thing, the only reason to join. It's the only reason we joined the MLS. One is we have to get the MLS. And two, we don't really have a choice to get our homes out there. We have to do this. That means we have to be part of the NAR, which is, again, is infuriating. Okay. My advice going forward, stop offering any sort of co-broker commissioning in leasing. Pause for effect. Stop offering a co-broker commission. If you put it on your website, if you offer 100 here, 200 there, 500 there, if you let your owners decide and advertise whatever your owners say, 100 here, 200 here, 500 there, 1 month's rent there, even if they pay for it on top of your leasing commission, whatever that may be, you're still creating a steering effect. You're still creating tenant realtors calling your office and say, what are you paying on that home? Well, 123 Main Street has a commission of $500. 127 Main Street has no commission. I guess I'll take my clients, my prospective applicants to become your tenant. I'm going to take them to 123 Main Street because you're paying $500. If you don't think steering is going to happen, you are ill-advised on human nature. It 100% is going to happen. One of the requirements inside of this NAR lawsuit settlement is that the MLS is going to have to eliminate any sort of filters inside their system. So before, and we've seen this happen, you're going to get a filter system that you could use before, even today probably. I got a list of 200 homes that are in this MLS, and they're all between $1,000 and $2,000. My clients want to see a list of those homes. Okay, cool. I'm going to take some filters and apply it to that list of 100 homes. Commissions. Who's paying the highest? I get an Excel spreadsheet. Ooh, okay, narrow down the funnel. Okay, great. Who's paying more than $500? Ooh, narrow down the funnel even further. And now it's down to 25 homes. That's the list I'm sending to my owners I'm sending to my prospective applicant tenants for them to see. If you think that doesn't happen in reality, you have not been in this market long enough. It's going to happen, which again, going back to fair housing, going back to the HUD, looking at property management as a whole, looking at what we call scope creep with Department of Justice. Hey, you know what? We're finished with the NAR. Let's take a stab at the property management industry next. So now we're going to come after them. So in saying that, I would again stop offering any sort of co-broker commissioning inside of your leasing platform. Can you create other incentives? Absolutely, yes. Now, this is where I met with our sales teams yesterday to create incentive commission programs for the buyers and sellers within your PM sales team. That's a long conversation because you can start to get creative. And kind of what I'm thinking inside of this is there will be another side effect to this where if the governing entity of the MLS the board of realtors, let me say it again. The governing entity does not include the MLS. It's the board of realtors, which the only reason to be inside the board of realtors is to have the MLS. So the board of realtors local, your real estate commission statewide maybe, and then your NAR, National Association of Realtors, all have these code of ethics going on. Well, if 1 and 3 are pretty much neutered, what is going on? The code of ethics become a great idea, right? That's never going to really be enforced because there's no entity to enforce it. So what happens is the listing agents are going to become the kings and queens of the industry. They're going to own the world. If you're a listing agent and you're good at what you do and you can generate listings like crazy, you're going to own the world. No worries for you. Your next challenge will just be figure out how to capture buyers. And there will no longer be a code of ethics in that. Let me explain that. So I'm a listing agent. Take me an example. Listing a home for sale. Buyer calls me up and says, hey, I want to look at your home. Great. Are you using a buyer's representative? Yes, I have a signed buyer's representation agreement with XYZ buyer's agent from XYZ company. Okay, cool. I'll let you see this home, but if you want to buy this home, it's $1,000. What are you paying that buyer's agent? Well, that buyer's agent's forcing me to pay them 3%. Well, if you just come buy this home with us and I'll act as an intermediary, I'll just charge you an extra $1,000. I'll tack it to the seller, and away we go. Okay, I'll come visit you. They're not going to honor those buyer representation agreements. I don't think judges are going to honor that because at the end of the day, the buyer just wants the home. You can argue with me about this. I'm sure there's going to be scenarios where I'm wrong. I'm not the ultimate authority on this stuff. I'm looking at it from our perspective. Where do we get ahead of the angles? We're going to create incentive commissions for our sellers. And the sellers are going to want to come to us and say, yes, I want you to sell the home for X%, and we're going to give them a couple options. If we sell the home by ourselves with no buyer's representation agreement at all outside of that, it's going to be 3% commission, okay? 2% commission, whatever the commission is going to be. If we act as an intermediary, it will be extra. You determine the amount. If the buyer brings a buyer representation agreement, they have to submit the commission in writing at the time of offer. You can agree to it or not agree to it at that time. If you get 10 offers in front of you, you can pick the best one for you to include the one that doesn't have a giant commission attached to it. Again, this is a steering effect. Again, this is going to be very negative on the housing market because sellers are going to go with the least commissioned offer. They don't care if it's a VA. They don't care if it's a 20% down. They don't care if it's a cash offer. It's all the same net to them in most scenarios. This is where, again, buyer's agency is going to die a quick death because sellers, if they price their home correctly, are going to have multiple offers to choose from. And the one with the least amount of commission attached is going to be the winner. This is where listing agents can snag those buyers and say, look, I'm going to help you get this home. I know you want the home. I'll act as an intermediary. There will be no dual agency. There's not going to be someone representing you. There's not going to be someone representing the seller necessarily. I'm going to be representing the deal. Here's a list of attorneys you can call if you have questions. And that's how things are going to go down in the future. That's what we're predicting. So back to what it means for property managers. Again, my advice, stop offering any sort of co-broker commissioning and leasing and get ahead of the creative incentives on commission for your sales. This is going to put you ahead of the game. So this has been a long episode. I just want to kind of close this out to tell you about the RentWerx Mastermind live and in person in San Antonio going on in Texas here, December 12th to 13th, 2024. This is a limited event with only 8 spots available. This live mastermind puts the entire playbook from RentWerx in your hands for immediate implementation, including all of our forms, processes, best practices, and vendor contacts. You'll also learn from the other attendees in the room how they operate their businesses, where their challenges lay, and we'll walk away with a goal set for 2025 with our EOS goal planning session. Our first event was sold out, and all the participants raved about their experience and left a review on the website. Go to rentwerxmastermind.com. That's rwmastermind.com. Again, rwmastermind.com to watch the reviews from the past attendees and get signed up there. Thanks again for listening, gang. This has been a great episode. I hope you got something out of it. Look forward to the next one and take care.